Economist.
People in Shanghai tend to have a more open sensibility to outside ideas. They're used to being international, and I think that this really makes it a really vibrant city.
Doing business in
Shanghai. Well, international travelers always arrive at Pudong Airport, which is a brand new airport, and in fact they've just completed a second terminal. The domestic terminal is actually at the other side of the river. It's called Hongqiao, and they've now opened it for some regional flights. So if you're coming from Japan, you may well be ending up at Hongqiao Airport. But for the most travelers, they would be coming into Pudong. It's a very modern airport. It's about over 30 miles actually from the city itself, so there is a bit of a journey. In terms of procedures at the airport, it's quite efficiently planned. However, because there are now so many international flights, you could be unlucky and come in at the same time as several other flights, in which case you'll probably have a bit of a lineup at immigration. Usually the problem is just the sheer volume of passengers and having to wait in the queue rather than the process itself. The signs are bilingual. The level of English proficiency on the part of staff will vary. There will be taxis. The taxi ranks are quite clearly marked. There is also a subway connection now, and there is what we call the maglev fast train, which is a really revolutionary kind of German-engineered train that gets you into a subway stop in Pudong itself. If you have a lot of luggage, I wouldn't advise it. The renminbi, Chinese currency, is not freely convertible, so the likelihood is that the traveler wouldn't have any renminbi, on arrival, and so you would have to either change money. There are money changers at the airport, or use a card to get money out of the ATM. There are really two parts to Shanghai. The old part of the city is called Puxi, and the references to the west bank of the Huangpu River. And so Puxi is where you find the historic buildings. It's the older business district. Pudong is the new area that's on the east bank of the river, and that really only began developing in the early 1990s. It's where the financial district is. And so I would advise travelers to look at their schedule of appointments and see which would make most sense, because although there are a number of tunnels and certainly transport from one side of the river to the other is easy, at certain times of the day you're going to be hitting quite a lot of traffic. In terms of hotels, Shanghai actually has pretty well every hotel from every chain imaginable. And so you do have a choice of every kind of 5-star and any kind of starred hotel on both sides of the river. I would say that the Shangri-La Hotel over on the Pudong side is great. On the Puxi side, you have hotels such as the Portman Hotel. Down in the old historic area known as the Bund, which is the old waterfront area, the brand new Peninsula Hotel is now open, so there really is an amazing choice. There are lots of taxis. They're relatively inexpensive. You, of course, will need to have your destination marked in Chinese characters. The level of English language amongst the taxi drivers is not very good. The subway system is quite comprehensive now, and it's relatively easy to use. So, after a day or two and you've got your bearings, if it makes more sense in terms of getting around the city to use the subway, then it's certainly a great option. The main holiday times in the Chinese calendar would be Chinese New Year, which is a lunar festival. It usually falls either in January or February. And I think travelers should certainly avoid going to anywhere in China, including Shanghai, at that time, because it's a major holiday for families and businesses will be closed for a good 2 weeks. There are what the Chinese call golden weeks, long holidays throughout the year, and another long holiday will be in October to mark National Day, and that usually means about a week's worth of holiday. These are the two main times of the year to avoid traveling. The weather in Shanghai is a very rainy kind of climate. relatively mild. The winters can get a bit cold. I think the main thing that travelers would try to avoid, though, would actually be the very hot weather, which is usually in August, when it can be quite steamy and uncomfortable. Business dress in Shanghai is relatively formal. Suits would be worn, ties and jackets and so forth. I think Chinese people are usually quite punctual. They're very conscious of time, and I think they would expect that any travelers, any visitors would respect this as well. Normally when you meet people for the first time, you shake hands. Quite early on in the conversation, when you are introduced to people, you usually present a business card with both hands as a sign of respect. When you receive a business card, you should certainly look at it and treat it with respect. Don't just shove it into your back pocket. I think people are relatively upfront, particularly when talking about business matters, talking about pricing and any other operating conditions that may be under discussion. So I don't think that you would find people would be very shy in bringing these matters up. What probably doesn't go down very well with a local business person would be someone coming from overseas who has made the assumption that business conditions in China are going to be, shall we say, less than modern, and that the kinds of competition that in fact the business person would face in China is not there. Food is a very important part of Chinese culture. They take it very, very seriously. And often a meal will be part of a business discussion. Meals generally start in the evening. They start quite early, so don't be surprised if a dinner invitation requires you to be at the table by 6:30. In terms of hosting the meals, it's usually quite clear who is the host. You don't go Dutch treat. In the first meal that you have with your Chinese business partners, they will probably be the hosts. You may feel, or it may be suggested to you, that you host the next round, in which case, of course, you pick up the entire tab. In terms of the discussion over the meal, whether it's lunchtime or dinner, it will probably be a mix of general topics. People like to talk about sport. A lot of people in business circles in Shanghai now enjoy golf. They are great soccer fans. People talk about their families as well. And then probably at some point in the meal, there will be some discussion about business. I would suggest that people don't raise political topics, particularly when they are in their first meeting with Chinese business partners. For a foreign visitor to be asking a lot of questions about Chinese politics would probably make their Chinese business partners a bit uncomfortable. Drinking at lunchtime is something that is now relatively rare in a city like Shanghai. However, in the evening, when it is a more relaxed kind of environment, often there will be drinks as part of the dinner, and the drinking culture is such that you toast your host, and as you go around the table, you are expected to offer a little bit of a toast with each member of the party. However, if you don't want to be involved in this, I would suggest that you make an excuse that you don't drink, or there's some health reason why you can't drink, and this will generally be respected. And so you should make your toast in tea or whatever soft drink that you're drinking instead. There are a number of areas in Shanghai that are entertainment districts. The one that a lot of people really enjoy is called Xintiandi. It's about 3 blocks now of restored, what they call longhouses, which are these row houses, and they've been made into a series of restaurants and boutiques, and it's a great area for nightlife. There are also very nice restaurants along the Bund, which is the waterfront area. Down at the Bund, one of the older restaurants that is still going strong is a restaurant called M on the Bund. And for the most traditional kinds of Shanghainese dumplings, which is one of the real signature dishes of the city, there's a restaurant called Din Tai Fung. It's a chain, and there are a number of outlets in the city. The tipping culture in China, it really depends on the kind of place you're going to. If it's a more traditional place, then there's no tipping. Normally speaking, a modern restaurant will include service as part of the overall bill. However, if you are particularly happy with the service that has been provided, then I'm sure the staff would appreciate a small gratuity. Shanghai is a pretty safe city. It's a very large city, and so the normal kinds of precautions would apply. Generally speaking, people should have their ID with them. I think the overall environment is quite safe. The Bund area is great for sightseeing, and you certainly do get the historic sense of what Shanghai really is famous for, which is, of course, as a port city and the dominant city during the 1920s and 30s in terms of finance in Asia. Shanghai has, I think, one of the best museums in the country. It's located in the area called People's Square. The museum has a great collection of Chinese art and Chinese artifacts. It's particularly well known for its collection of bronzeware. Other things to see in the city, there is a very good art museum. There is also an art district called Moganshan. In terms of local culture, there are a number of temples. The most famous local area is probably the Yu Gardens, which is a mixture of a Ming Dynasty traditional Chinese garden with local temple and local places for eating, places for shopping. So it's a whole entertainment district in its own right. There are also a number of temples that are well worth seeing, including one that is quite close to the central district called Jing'an Temple. There's a whole range of retail experiences in the city now. You have very modern shopping malls that have all of the branded goods, and it really ranges from that kind of shopping experience all the way down to street markets. I've lived in Shanghai for about 10 years, and what I really like about the city is that it is a fantastic mix of East and West. It looks like the most European city in the country, and that is indeed what it is. It was laid out by Europeans. The core of the city is the old Chinese city, and around that, sort of surrounding it, you have what really became the concessions, the French concession, what was the international concession, and the kinds of architectural styles that you see in these different parts of the city reflect that history. So you really have in microcosm the history of China over the last 150, 200 years or so. And then on top of all of the historical monuments, you also have the new Shanghai. And so I think as a reflection of this, people in Shanghai tend to have a more open sensibility to outside ideas. They're used to being international. And I think that this really makes it a really vibrant city. I guess the thing that sometimes can be a bit difficult about living there is simply the volume of population. It's a very, very big city.
The Economist.